Well, on Tuesday, the 2nd of November at 6 o'clock at the Borders Book Festival at Abbotsford House, a special show taking place featuring Tom English, author, journalist and broadcaster, talking to Jim Telfer and Finlay Calder about the book he's written called This Is Your Everest, which references that spine-tingling speech given by Jim Telfer on the Lions tour of South Africa in 1997. And Tom joining me on the line now. Tom, it's a fascinating subject for a book, of course, and one that I'm sure you enjoyed getting your teeth into.
I did, Stuart. Yeah, look, I mean, we all remember that tour. We all remember, certainly if you don't remember the tour, you remember the Living with Lions video, which I think kind of propelled that tour into the heart of every rugby-loving fan. I'd say it's more so than any other Lions tour because it seems more intimate to us. Because we were on the inside. It was a fly-on-the-wall documentary. Even though if you weren't in South Africa, you felt like you were there because of the close-up coverage that we got from that documentary. And the tour and that video really inspired the book.
And it's very interesting as well because Gavin Hastings is also at the Borders Book Festival, and he was captain of the Lions in 1993, 4 years before, and that was the last amateur era Lions tour. And this was the first of the pro. It was a fascinating insight and something that had never really been done before.
Never been done before, absolutely. Certainly not in rugby. Other sports had done it. In America, there had been similar kind of fly-on-the-wall things done. But this was certainly rugby's first crack at it, and there was a naivety and an innocence to it. And all the players initially were some of them were a bit reticent about it, but the camera guys were so skillful and so subtle that very quickly on that tour that the players forgot that they were even there. So that was a brilliant piece of work that they did. You know, they captured something majestic. It was the first professional tour, but there was still the remnants of the amateur ethos there, and you could see that camaraderie, that heroic boozing sessions. All of that stuff was still there. That comes out in the book for sure, and they were up against this beastly opposition, world champions, seemingly unbeatable, with the two great Scots, with McGeek and Telfer pulling the strings. They managed to obviously find a way of beating them, and it's a pretty epic way that they did it.
Now, when you were researching the book, was there anything really that surprised you?
Yeah, myself and Pete Burns, co-writer, we kind of knew the Lions story. We just wanted to add to it. We wanted to tease it out. We wanted to bring out more of the personalities of Martin Johnson and Keith Wood and Scott Gibbs and all the other huge players, Delali, all of these guys. We wanted to flesh out their own rugby story, their own personal story. But what we felt wasn't covered at all anywhere was the South African side of it and the devastating impact that this had on South Africa. That is where we found some really eye-opening stuff. And I remember, back in 95, everyone was rejoicing about Nelson Mandela and Francois Pienaar and South Africa were world champions. This was going to be the game that unites the nation and all the rest of it. And it did no such thing. It united South Africa maybe for a couple of hours on that amazing Saturday afternoon. But that was the end of it. By 97, South Africa was a deeply, deeply divided country. There was a numerous high-profile racist attacks. One of the South African players who played against the Lions in 1997, a guy called Henry Trump, he was capped in 1996. He was a farmer. He beat one of his black farmer labourers to death. Not a massive story in South Africa. This is a number of years before the Lions ever arrived. But he did a paltry time in prison and came out and went on to play the Springbok. So he was a capped player. He was a Springbok by the time the Lions turned up. And I thought it was extraordinary. For that to happen in South Africa on top of all sorts of other racism scandals around the Springbok, it was a team and a squad that was riven with internal fighting. And none of this really came out at the time. So digging deep about that was fascinating. We found out to the extent that South Africa was so troubled internally and externally. And this whole idea that, the 1995 World Cup win was the win that cured all ills was ridiculous.
And that is quite extraordinary, what you've just told me there.
Yeah, I found it eye-opening. The Carol du Plessis was the coach in 97 when the Lions played them. And Carol du Plessis had been a brilliant Springbok, fantastically flamboyant player. But he was a very, very technical coach. He was a bit of a geek. Maybe some would say he was ahead of his time. But in a forward-dominated game, Springboks love to play, he was the other side of the coin. He wanted them to play with a bit more freedom, bring the backs into it, and there was resistance to that. Right up to 97, there was resistance to it. And the players felt that he was dull. In fact, one of them said that they regularly would fall asleep during his team talks. But what I found fascinating here was that very, very few of the players, and Gary Teichmann, the captain, was the same, didn't believe in his coach. All of the big-name players did not believe in Carl Duplessis. But they all were utterly convinced going into that Lions series that they were still going to win 3-0. They didn't rate the Lions, even though the Lions were beating up all sorts of provincial opposition in that tour leading up to the Test series. They all felt, the Springboks felt, that the Lions would get their comeuppance when they came up against the mighty Boks. And it didn't matter if Carl Duplessis or Mickey Mouse was coaching the Boks, they were still going to beat the Lions because they were the Boks. They had this supremacy about them. And leading up to that was fascinating to see that kind of aura that they had about themselves slowly dissipate, slowly unravel, and all these other things come into play. Self-doubt come to the fore. The divided South Africa comes to the fore. Black South Africa rejoicing in the downfall of the Springboks, just like they did in 1974 when McGeechan was a player in the great victorious 1974 tour, Lions tour in South Africa. Almost like going back in time.
You were saying to me this is actually the first time you've done kind of like a live event in support of your book. So it's going to be quite fascinating, quite interesting for yourself as well. And no doubt what you've just told me will be discussed and plenty of other stories as well. So what else can we expect from the night?
Well, Calder, the great Calder will be there, and the great Telfer will be there. Delighted to share a stage with those two guys. I will certainly feel a little bit in awe of them for sure, or a lot in awe of them, considering everything that they have done in the game, and the nothing that I have done in the game apart from write a few books. So I'm really looking forward to meeting them. Jim I know really, really well. Finn I don't know well, but I hear so many amazing things about him. So I'm looking forward to meeting those guys and just talking rugby, talking about that tour, talking about the tour we've just seen. And once you saw that tour in last summer, you can't unsee it, unfortunately. I think it was a particularly bleak summer for the game of rugby. Not just because of COVID, not because there was no fans at these games in South Africa, the show that they put on. And I can't blame the players. I'm not even sure who I blame. Maybe I've just blamed the way rugby has evolved. But that Test series was horrendous. Awful to watch. I think it damaged rugby. So it'll be nice to go back to 97 when they played rugby, when there were big personalities there. And I'm just looking forward to just chatting about the game then and the game now with great rugby people.